Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus the Trident Realm. This battle was fought at 2250 points, and the scenario was Smoke and Mirrors. Now, before we continue our exploration of 3rd edition, I'd like to talk about something for a quick second. As many of you know, it's always difficult to ask for money, and a friend of mine, Dan Miner, has recently started a GoFundMe page for my personal air travel to and accommodations to the US Masters. I've made it in the past and haven't been able to go. I've only been able to go once, and it was for Warhammer, and even then I had to have it paid for me, just because, I mean, we live in America and everything costs money. So I'm not super comfortable with asking for funds, especially on this page. I don't have a Patreon, for example, but at the end of the day, I realized that I want to be putting out a bit more content this year that isn't just battle reports, although obviously that will remain my focus, and I want to talk more about Kings of War as a whole, and to do that, I really need to get out there, and to get out there, I really need your help. So feel free to leave donations, anything helps. I'll put a link in the video description below, or if you're watching this from the Facebook links, I will start linking that in the Facebook description for this video. So with that unpleasantry out of the way, let's get into my opponent's army. First off, it is the Trident Realm, obviously, and it opens with 2 hordes of Gigas. Then it has 2 hordes of Depth Horrors, one of whom has the Brew of Strength and one has the Blood of the Old King. Then we have 2 Troop of Thule, 2 Knuckers, a Kraken, Ector, the Trident King, a Naiad Envoy with the Horn, the Horn of Ocean's Fury, and Bastion 2, and a Thule Mythicin with Banechant 2, Lightning Bolt 3, and the Boomstick, so that's actually Lightning Bolt 6. So let's get through what these units are real quick, as I did in my previous video. First off, let's talk about the Gigas. Essentially, the change with the Gigas is that they made them have 1 less crushing. I believe they were Crush 3 before, and now they are merely Crush 2. But they did, in exchange for that, gain Nimble. And while they don't have the elite that they had in their previous formation, they do have Vicious with their melee, which mathematically is identical. Vicious is the exact same thing as elite, unless you're not rolling to wound, obviously, because then it doesn't do anything. So yeah, these guys are pretty brutal, and on top of it, they are on 50 mil bases instead of 40 mil bases. I guess this is another Mantic deciding that the models won't fit on 40s very well, which is fair enough. The Gigas are very large models, so yeah, they're a pretty solid unit. Then let's talk about, or next up, let's talk about the Depth Horrors, which I believe have remained mostly the same. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're exactly the same. There might be some point discrepancies, but I don't know Depth Horrors well enough to say one way or the other. But I will talk about the Thule, who have also remained the same, and that is amazing. Thule with 15 attacks and 3+ melee, along with that Ensnare and Stealthy. I think that they are still excellent in troops, and I'm glad that they did not change. Now let's talk about the Knuckers real quick, who have received a bit of a change. Before they were Thunderous 3 on top of their, Nimble, Pathfinder, Stealthy, all that stuff that they base head rules for, and then in the Clash of Kings 2019 update they received Stealthy and I believe, was it just Stealthy? Oh, and 3+ melee. So they retained all that. They're 150 points, which I think is a slight point increase, but the big change is that they're no longer Thunderous 3, they're now Crush 1, Thunder 1. And that's a bit of a side grade. I mean, it's not as good at what they actually do, which is they tend to just alpha into a side, or they go into a war engine, or whatever, right? But still, the Knucker is a great buy. 2 Thunder is about worth 1 Crush in my mind, so it's a bit of a change. Then we have the Kraken, which went down pretty significantly in attacks. It used to be 15 attacks, now it's merely 12, but it did gain Wild Charge D3, so this thing has an optimum of a 17-inch total charge range, and it gained the Octopian special rule, or keyword, which I guess it didn't really gain, it just has that now in 3rd edition. But that's a big deal because Thule Mythicins actually don't inspire Thule anymore. They inspire Octopians, so they inspire that Kraken. Pretty cool. Next up, we have Ector, who had a small points increase. I think that might just be a reversal of the points decrease that he received in 3rd edition. But then we have the Trident King. I believe that's about the same as well. Then we have the Naiad Envoy with the Horm of Ocean's Fury. That is a very good upgrade. The Naiad Envoy received some pretty significant changes. It used to be able to, in the 2019 update, buy heal, for example, but that is all gone now. Now, instead, it is a Horn of Ocean's Fury, which gives all infantry and heavy infantry within its aura, which is 6 inches, Fury, which is obviously really good. I like it for the Thule. I think it also impacts all these heroes. I believe they still count as infantry, so pretty cool there. And then on top of it, we have Bastion, which is just the rename of, what was it called? Heroism before? It's the rally spell. So if you successfully get 1 or more successes with your dice, you get +1 rally total. So you have a max rally 1 with just the spell, or if you already have rally, you can have rally 2. And then of course it gets the unit that it is cast on. It gives them +1/+1 nerve as well. So still a really good spell, and I think that is a great unit. Yeah. Moving forward, we have the Thule Mythicon, who received a bit of a change just because there was a split between the Thule Mythicon and the new Thule Aquamage, which inspires Waterbound, while this Thule Mythicon is the classic one. It inspires Octopians. So yeah, it has Bane Chant too. I don't think it had access to Lightning Bolt before, or any really damage spells, and now it can buy Surge, which is pretty good, and it's still a pretty solid brawler for a wizard, right? I think it's still a good pick. I think my opponent might have overloaded right here with the amount of items with that Lightning Bolt, but it's one of those things where I sort of flip-flop between going, do I want one 24-inch range gun just so I can reach out and touch people, or is it, well, I only brought 1, so I might as well bring none. So I don't know, it's a difference there, and you can leave your thoughts below in the comments if you want. So as for my thoughts on the army as a whole, I think it's a good start towards optimized Trident Realm list. I think it's pretty solid here. The only things I'm not a big fan of, I'd probably drop the Depthors. I actually think that they're really good. I shouldn't say that I'm not a big fan of them. I am. But Placoderms are so good now, especially if you're going to put that Naiad Envoy with its Horm into the list. With the filthy fish monsters out of the way, let's get into the meat of it with the Empire of Dust. I still love this army. I think it's very interesting this edition. So let's go through a very weird list that I've come up with here, or I think it's a little weird. It's different from what I used to run. It opens with 2 hordes of skeleton warriors, who are the new, I guess they were called warriors before. Then we have a regiment of Revenant Cav, always a good unit in Undead, and now it's a good unit in Empire of Dust as well, with the Blade of Slashing. Then we have 2 legions of Revenant Chariots, 2 Balefire Catapults, who both have the Scarab Jar upgrade. Then we have a Monolith, 2 Undead Worms, and then 2 Revenant King on Great Undead Flying Worm. That's just a mouthful. I just wrote Flying Worm here. Both of whom have the Surge 8 and Breath 12 upgrades, and then one has the Blessing of the Gods, and the other the Blood of the Old King. So let's go through these units real quick and see what has changed. Overall, Empire of Dust is a very interesting army, I think, in 3rd edition. It used to be a very heal-oriented force, but honestly, with the changes to Cursed High Priest, I know some people disagree with this, but I look at them and I go, that is super overpriced. They are 85 points base, and then pay 35 points for heal 5, and then 30 points for heal 8, and come with no spells. They're still inspiring, there's still a dash 13 nerve, which is all great, and then they gained a weird special rule where they can reroll 2 dice on skeleton units, which is better than I initially thought because I missed out that like bone giants are obviously skeletons, but still it's not the entire list, right? Like you can't cast on mummies, for example, which is a big deal. You really want to be healing your units that also have regen and also have high defense. It's about multiplicative defense. So yeah, I just look at those Cursed High Priests and I go, I don't think they're going to make my list anymore. Hopefully that'll change in the future. I've only played a couple of games with Empire of Dust, and this is the first of them. So yeah, let's get into it. We've got the Skeleton Warriors first. They didn't receive that many changes. They have a slight nerf in that their nerve is now a dash 22 instead of dash 23, but they received a point reduction for their trouble. So I think they're still a solid unit, and honestly, I think they're kind of a must include given the changes to the list overall. So yeah, you might be tempted to put in the Skeleton Spearmen, but the problem with Spearmen is that one, Skeleton Spearmen don't actually receive that big of an upgrade because, for example, because they hit on a 5+. Spearmen tend to get that +5 attack upgrade and then cost appropriately, right? But Skeleton Spearmen, those 5 attacks aren't as good as a unit that hits on a 4+. It's, you know, 1/6 worse to hit. So it's not as important as it is in other armies. And the Phalanx rule, while good, lives and dies by how many flyers slash cav actually enter the meta. If there aren't any, it's useless. If there are, it's good. It's still a binary rule. So anyway, that's my thoughts on them. I think you bring Skeleton Warriors. Next up, the Revenant Chariots. These are excellent. I really like the Legions. I'm really digging Chariots this edition. I know a lot of people are kind of down on them, but honestly, if you weren't a big elf Chariot fan before, you were just a Chariot fan, I think the rest of them got significantly better. So the Revenant Chariots, and what I mean by how did they get better? Well, they're more expensive and they're irregular, so that's not better per se. Like, I wouldn't say they're better than they were. I would just say that they're still good. It's more of a side downgrade, I guess, because it's a slight downgrade, but then they receive some new playability in that they fire 10 shots on 5s now with steady aim. That's actually a pretty big deal because before they were firing, sure, they had 16 shots on 5s, but here's the thing, they took all negatives. So if you ever wanted to move your chariots, well, now you're 16 shots on 6s and you're likely firing into stealthier cover. So it's 8 shots on 6s. Now you've got those 10 shots on 5s. It wouldn't be fair to say you have 10 shots on 5s versus 8 shots on 6s, but you have 10 shots on 6s versus 8 shots on 6s. So I think that's a worthwhile upgrade on top of the fact that now they have 20 attacks in melee and they're unit strength 4 for that Legion. I'm all for it. Dash 22 nerve, just a really, really solid unit in my opinion. Next up, we have the Balefire Catapults. Now, these were shown off with the Undead preview, and I think they're interesting. I brought them in this list because I own 2 of them, and I played them at the beginning of 2nd edition to play them out. I didn't like them then, and now I'm like, they're okay. They're at least interesting. So they received the changes that all the war engines did in that they now have those 2 attacks, but then they don't do D6+1, they do D3+1 per hit. They still ignore cover. They're now piercing 2. I think they were piercing 3 before. But they have a very strange rule in Unholy Flames, which is whenever they roll to damage, they re-roll D3 failed damage. So you roll the hit, you roll the number of hits you get, then you roll the number of re-rolls you can use on wounds. So it's a bit of bookkeeping. It's a bit of I don't know. It's a bit clunky to me, but whatever. It's fine. And then lastly, we have the Scarab Jars upgrade, which is an Empire of Dust only upgrade, and it gives them Shattering, which I actually really, really like. Empire of Dust they've always sort of been like the quote shooting undead, which is they're not very good at it, or they weren't. I was like shooting undead, but that's not a thing, so throw that away, and you are the healing undead instead. So now I look at it and I go, there might be a shooting list in here. It's probably buried, but I do like the Scarab Jar upgrade if you're going to bring the Balefire Catapults. And then they do compete with the Soul Snare, which is still very, very good, but I did not bring one in this list, so we'll have to talk about it a different time. Next up, we have the Monolith. So the Monolith is a very, very unique unit to me, and it's in fact I believe also a unique unit, period. But the Monolith it was previewed before, I think, on Mastercrafted, but it's speed 5 and def 5. That's actually a big change. It's speed 5. It moves, right? It can walk around. It's not a shambling unit. It can just wander the table. It's still a dash 17, and I think this is the replacement for Cursed High Priest for me. It's 120 points, which is what is that, 15 more or 5 more points more 5 points more than a Cursed High Priest is. But in exchange for that, you get much higher nerve, you get a much larger radius for your inspiring, because you're based on a 75, not on a 20 mil base. You are, I think I said unit strength 1, but you're def 5. You're really tall, which is actually a negative here. But the big thing being, the Monolith has a special surge, so it's still surge 8. But it can cast that anywhere within 24 inches of it. So it's double the range for surge, and it does not need line of sight. That is amazing. I expect a lot of monoliths to show up in people's armies from now on. Next up, we have the Undead Worm. So the Undead Worm is essentially the same as the Bone Dragon was, with the notable changes of it's now 10 attacks instead of 9. It's dash 18 nerve instead of dash 17. It's 15 points. Or no, was it 5? Was it 210 before? No, I think it was 200. So I think it's 15 points more now. And of course, it's on a 75 mil base, which is not good for it. But I think the piece still has some play. I'm interested in putting it on the table. And honestly, I just had some models that I was like, if this is good, I can just paint them and I like the way they look. So yeah, I think the Undead Worm gets kind of again, a bit of a side grade where that 75 mil change is big. That is not a good change for them. But it is good aesthetically. Like it lets you field bigger models and choose some cooler looking stuff. And then that dash 18 nerve and 10 attacks is significantly better. So it'll be interesting to put it on the table. Next up, we have the Revenant King on Great Undead Flying Worm. These guys are really good. They received a bit of a nerf as well, just because they used to be a dash 20 nerve, I believe, and have 12 attacks, which all the big dragons did. But now none of them have that. None of them are dash 20, none of them are 12 attacks. So it's not that big of a deal that they received those nerfs as well. But in exchange, they can now buy a breath attack on the flying version instead of just on the burrowing worm. So I really like that change, especially as the burrowing worm doesn't have vicious on it anymore. So yeah, it is a breath 12, and on top of this can have surge for 15 more points. So I don't think you're going to bring this thing without bringing surge. And in fact, that was sort of my point where I'm like, yeah, I'll take the breath. I just realized I wrote breath 12. It's range 12. It's actually breath 10. So I played that wrong in my game, unfortunately. Hopefully it doesn't make that big of a difference, but just keep that in mind for the future. So I do think these guys are really good. I'd really like this list to work out. I think that flying Alpha Strike lists are sort of poo-pooed upon in this edition, and I'd like to see one come to life, especially from an unlikely place out of Empire of Dust. So my thoughts on the army, I think it's okay. I'd prefer if I didn't have to bring Skeleton Warriors, but here we are, and we'll see. Let's get into the game itself with the setup. So first off, let's talk about the terrain. So starting in the lower right, as we do, we have a height 3 hill. Right above that, we have a height 2 obstacle. To the left of that, we have a height, what is that, height 6? I think we're still running the forest as height 6. They're either height 6 or height 7. Then we have a height 4 impassable. Right below that, we have a height 2 hill. And above, or height 3 hill, sorry, I'm gonna do that. Above that, we have a height 3 hill. To the right of it, we have a height 1 graveyard. And then all the way over here, because I'm bad at planning, we have another height 4 impassable. Right below that, we have a height 6 or 7 forest. And then all the way over here, we have another height 1 graveyard that all my undead dragons are hiding in, which is very apropos. Next up, let's talk about the scenario. So Smoke and Mirrors is a very interesting one. Starting off, it uses bluff counters. So whenever a scenario has bluff counters, I believe you always get 5. So bluff counters are objectives that are put on the table, and they are worth a hidden amount. So you get 2 that are worth 0, 2 that are worth 1, and 1 that's worth 2. So each of us received our 5 bluff counters, and in Smoke and Mirrors, you take turns deploying them on your opponent's side of the table. So all mine are past the center line here, and all my opponents are past the center line there. So yeah, you put them down one by one. They have to be 12 inches away from each other. They have to be 3 inches away from impassable, normal objective rules. And at the end of each round, you roll off, which I think is weird. It should probably just be first player flips the first token, but you roll off for some reason, and then that person chooses who reveals a token every round. You can only reveal the tokens that are on your side of the table, so you can only reveal your opponent's tokens and not your own. So that's the idea. Let's look at where the tokens ended up. So first off, we have 1 here. Right above that, we have 1 here in the far right corner. Then right on over here, I guess. Sorry about that swift down. We have 1 towards the center. We have 1 over here. Below that, we have 1 there. over here. We have one there, and then we have one here and one here, I believe. Oh, and then we have one right below all the dragons right on there. So those are all the tokens. The way I did this play out, I played a lot of Netrunner back in the day, and if you ever played Netrunner, you can probably guess where this is going, which is I loved playing Jinteki, which was a cup game of a faction. So you'd always, go like, oh, do you get points off of me? Do you get victory points? Let's just put things in my hands and you choose one or the other. And when I did that, I really enjoyed playing the cup game without me knowing. I can't give you information that I don't have. So I would just stare at something else and throw. So with these tokens, I shuffled them and did not know what they were until I put them down on the table, which was, it's a strategy. It's not a particularly good one, but there are basic strategies, like my opponent has likely put the 0 tokens in my deployment zone, while I might have put my 2 to hide it because I have greater mobility, so I don't have to worry too much about that. So anyway, let's get into the armies now. First off, we have 2 hordes of Gigas, which are on their larger bases now. I think my opponent plans to use fluorescent acrylic under them because he already did the water effects. So just make them bigger. And in between them, we have our Tipsy Ector. Then to the right of that, we have our first horde of Depth Horrors with our first troop of Thule. And this model right here is actually the Naiad Envoy because the Siren is, I don't know if you'd bring that anymore. Anyway, to the right of that, we have our second horde of Depth Horrors. These are the ones with Brew of Strength, which made those previous ones the Blood of the Old King, with our second troop of Thule. Then we have our Kraken, and then the Thule Mythicon with Lightning Bolt 6, effectively, and Banechant 2. Then off here on the right flank, or as I would see at the right flank, we have the Trident King and both of the Knuckers. Now facing off against that flank, we have our first Revenant King. This is the one with Blessing of the Gods and Breath 10 with Surge 8. Then we have our first Balefire Catapult. To the right of that, we have our first Bone Worm. What are they called? Undead Worm. So first Undead Worm right there. Then to the right of that, we have our second Revenant King with the Blood of the Old Gods, Breath 10 and Surge 8. Then we have the Balefire Catapult right there. We have our first Legion of Chariots, and then this is going to be a long shot. We have our Revenant Cav with the Blade of Slashing. Then this here, all of the mummy models I was making, these are just running as skeletons today. So we have our first horde of skeletons right there. Then we have the second horde of skeletons, and then the second Legion of Chariots, along with the second Undead Worm. And of course, Nagash today is playing the Monolith. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for the Monolith model just yet, but I'll figure it out eventually. And let's take a look at turn 1. So turn 1 goes to the Trident Realm, and they decide to just advance forward. I think that taking turn 1 was a smart play by my opponent. Second player often gets, well, always gets a chance to just grab loot token or grab objectives at the end of the game, because Kings of War, I think 3rd edition is a great change, and I love that there's more agency during the turns, but oof, stop with all the scoring at the end of the game. From a personal level, if you make us score every turn, right, or every other turn, I like starting on the second player's second turn, start the scoring then. It makes it so the game is more dynamic, and it makes it so second player doesn't have a gigantic advantage, especially because you just nerfed shooting so much. So anyway, moving forward, they will lose the ability to grab objectives at the end of the game, but I'm significantly faster than my opponent here, so they're trying to push into the center before I can just push them out, right? So I think that was a smart move. Pretty much everything just runs forward as you do on turn 1. I believe that, nothing is within my charge range. I think that the Kraken might have gone and said, yeah, charge me with this one Revenant King, but I'm never going to do that. It has Ensnare and it's in the woods. I don't want to hit on a 6. So that's that. Both the Knuckers are chargeable, but I have to charge them in the front. And I believe I can only see with this Undead Dragon and not that one. So there's that. Let's move into the shooting phase. So we have the Lightning Bolt right here, Lightning Bolt 6 going into my Chariots, doing 2 wounds, and you can't roll a 20 on 2 dice. So we move forward into the end of the turn. So here is Empire of Dust turn 1, and it's a bit of an interesting one. In the middle, I wanted to keep myself back out of the charge range of the Gigas. There's no reason to get charged just yet, but the other thing is that I do this weird maneuver with the Monolith. First off, I misdeployed the Monolith. It's the first time I played it with the ability to move, so, you know, you're gonna misdeploy it. But secondly, I also wanted to cast Surge, and I wanted to cast Surge this way, so I turned it this way. Again, the Monolith does not need line of sight, but I was thinking it needed arc for some reason. So yeah, I turned it this way. It did not need to be like that. It should have been one facing this way and actually about where it is. But anyway, I do that, which means these skeletons actually have to pull back a little bit to stay in the inspiring aura of the Monolith, because I don't want to lose them for no reason. The other half of this movement tray fell off. It's just full of metal models, so it doesn't stay upright. And then otherwise, we've got the chariots sitting still. I did play them incorrectly at the beginning of this turn. In this round, because they have short bows, not bows anymore. So this round I played them as bows, and I played them as short bows later. But unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen in a new edition. Now, the interesting part of this play is that I take this bone dragon, and it can pivot. So it pivots this way, lands there, and then pivots back, because now it's in the flank of the Knucker. And I have one 24-inch Surge 8, which again, that's just so good. So we have one 24-inch Surge to cast on it, and then I also position these dragons, especially this one, to be able to cast a Surge on it first or second, it doesn't really matter. And then I have another dragon, which I'd prefer to do a breath attack. I do reposition it at the end of this turn, where I just put it on the exact board edge, because it has this sliver of line of sight onto this Knucker if it wants to. So because I'm gonna put a Titan in the way, right? So it's gonna be height 6 on height 6. So I need to have slight line of sight. So yeah, I'm planning to do that, and let's see how it goes. We have this Surge going first. I believe I get Surge 1. I don't go very far, so I'm like, I might have to use all my dragons on it. But then this dragon goes in and bam, Surge 7. So hits all 7 or hits 7 out of the 8, and I get the flank charge there. Which leaves my other dragon able to shoot over here. I believe I played this wrong as well, because I don't think I took both the negatives for stealthy and for cover with my breath attack. So a bit unfortunate there, but I do 2 wounds, I think. So anyway, I did roll 6s to hit, in case you were wondering, but I should have been I thought I was on 5s to hit. So yep, I do 2 wounds there. I do not get a waiver. It's still ready to go. And with the rest of my shooting, I cheat a bit here. Fire into the depth horrors back there, because it's on 6s for the Thule or 6s for the depth horrors anyway, so I might as well shoot at this depth 3. And then I fire both of my rocks into these depth horrors. I only hit with 1 out of the 4 shots, which isn't all that bad. I do get 4 hits, and then I think I do 4 wounds. So yeah, it's okay. I think my opponent at this point realized that they hadn't cast Bastion, and so I let them take it back and cast Bastion. Or maybe, yeah. So anyway, they cast Bastion onto this unit, giving them a -19 nerve. So that's probably not going to go anywhere. And then I have these chariots ready to fire into these Thule. They do 1 or 2 wounds, and not enough to do. Oh, apparently we don't talk about this fight at all, which is my dragon charges into the flank of this Knucker. I do 10 wounds to it, but then I get a waiver because I roll a 3. So pretty funny there. Bad nerve check though. And we move into turn 2. So turn 2, things are heating up a little bit, just as they tend to do. So we have the Gigas moving forward, you know, just maintaining a battle line. My opponent explained this to me. I like to keep back a little bit, right? I like to have just slivers, but especially when you're playing against undead with the amount of surge going on, it's a pretty good thing to weave an exact line, which I agree with. And now they've decided to, in 3rd edition, it's very clear about what a corner charge is. It's only if you are corner to corner. You can have any amount of room that's not the corner, and it's a legal charge. So yeah, it's a bit more crystal clear now what is a corner charge and what is not. So yeah, maintain that battle line, guys. Then we have the middle. These guys just sort of roll forward a little bit. I'm not sure what they're doing. They're keeping out of charge range of I believe that the Thule are within charge range of my Revenants. I'm not going to take that charge. And then they're keeping out of charge range of the skeletons. I'm not sure I would do that. I need the skeletons to hold this flank up. So I'm not sure what they're doing. But anyway, they do it. Then we have the Knucker that was next to the Wavered Knucker decide to take a charge into my War Engine there. I don't care too much about that. I'd prefer not to lose my War Engine right now, but it's still better to me that it charged into there instead of into, say, my dragon. I want my dragon able to shoot its breath attack, surge, or charge what it wants. So yeah, I'm gonna lose the War Engine, but that's fine. And then we have the Knucker here deciding to disengage. I actually messed up in my previous turn and had fallen back 1 inch, so we reversed it, and then they fall back 1 inch and get a pivot. So they're pivoting to face me just to show off the frontage. But another thing, you lose nimble now, regardless of whether you are a flyer or not. If you're wavered, you lose nimble. So that's a pretty big change for these Knuckers. It makes their mobility a little lower. So let's move into the shooting. So we got the Trident King and the Mythicin right here. Firing into my Bone Dragon. They managed 3 wounds total, which is okay, I guess. The Trident King was, I had cover versus that, and so, whatever. Take 3 wounds, and the Ector decides to shoot into my Bone Dragon, pushes it to the side to make it so I don't have line of sight anymore to these Gigas. Not that I would charge them, but I can't. And then also managing 3 wounds on it. So an interesting bit of shooting there, 6 wounds total. And here we go into the combat. Yeah, this Knucker does 15 wounds to me, and poof, that War Engine is gone. So my opponent did roll I believe they rolled a 4. It was not a high roll, but needed a double 1 to kill it. So got it, and then we figured out that if another thing in 3rd edition is that before you could go forward D6 inches, back D3 inches, or you could pivot in place at the end of a combat. But now you can also go to the side. You can crab walk D3 inches after combat. So yeah, that's a pretty cool change, and my opponent opts to do it, as even with a 1 inch crab walk, they will get out of the line of sight of my dragon here. So just something to be aware of for the future. I was aware of it, but I wasn't thinking about it when I placed the dragon, so I should have placed it a little better, I think. But anyway, moving on into Empire of Dust turn 2. So Empire of Dust turn 2 looks a bit like this. First off, both my skeleton hordes go on in. We got 1 skeleton horde versus the Thule right there, the little Thule troop. Then we have the second one going into the Gigas. Now this is interesting because these ones are on 5s and then 6s, while these guys are on 6s and then 3s. So I don't know. I think I probably kill this on average. I've got 25 attacks, so I get, 4-ish hits, and then I wound on a 3, I do 3 wounds. It's already at 2 wounds. It gets to 5, so it's a 7. But I think it's a 7 twice, because I think the Naiad Envoy is right there. So probably don't kill it on average then. But anyway, were it not inspired, it's probably dead on average. Then we have my chariots just sitting still. I believe they actually backed up because they are steady aim now again. Pretty big difference. So they back up a little bit to get line of sight onto the Gigas. Well, not to get line of sight, but to dodge their charge, because they're charge 10 now, but that's still not all that great. I take this dragon, and it doesn't want to stay on its base, so I just place it on the hill. It's now height 9, so it can see basically, anything. I move the monolith, and this is where I said I definitely shouldn't have been facing like this, because all I can do is advance, right? So I just advance forward. I wish I had been facing like this to begin with, because then I could have opted to, well, I couldn't because there was a wall there, but I could have opted to better go this way, right? I couldn't turn any more than I did. We have the Remnant Cav just sitting still. There's no reason to advance. These chariots, I believe, also don't advance. They might have backed up a little bit. And then I right the dragon here because I don't think this Knucker is going to stay here for long, because the Bone Dragon, which had flank charged this Knucker, is like, yeah, I can get a rear on that one. So it just spins around and flies on down to an inch away from the Knucker's bottom. And then I've got the surge from the monolith if I want, or I have the surge from my dragon if I truly mess up and that dragon is facing towards this Knucker. It wants to do its breath attack instead. So let's see how it all goes. We have these chariots firing into the depth horrors, managing to do 3 wounds, I believe, to them. It looks like. Oh, it looks like these guys are at 1 wound. So yeah, definitely that's an 8 to kill them on average. Then we have these chariots firing into the Thule again. they do 1 wound, so whatever. And then we have my dragon here firing into the Knucker, who is now dead. I only managed 1 wound, but I believe it was already on 10, so 11 wounds, need a 4 to kill it twice, and I do, by the way, roll a 4. So now I have the high roll of the game. We're tied at a mighty 4. And at the end of the turn, yeah, this Knucker also dead because my dragon rear charges it and doesn't roll double ones. It does, by the way, roll a 3. So that 4 is the high roll for me so far. And then in the middle, I do remember not to back up this time. So I have these skeletons going into these Gigas. I think they do 2 damage to them, which is okay. I only managed 1 damage against these guys because I only hit once. So yeah, but I do get a waiver, I think. No, I don't waiver them. Now, an unfortunate thing about the not backing up an inch is it's gonna take some time mentally to understand, you know, that, oh, you're not gonna fall back an inch, thus this will not be a front charge. This is an obvious flank. You know, it happens. It's just the growing pains. And let's move on to turn 3. So turn 3 for the Trident Realm. First off on the left, we have the Gigas going into the flank of my skeletons. They're probably dead. The other Gigas decide to countercharge. They could have gone... Oh no, they couldn't charge my skeletons, right, because it would have been a flank charge. It's impossible. So yeah, they choose to charge into the skeletons, and they might need it because the Gigas still only have 12 attacks. So even in the flank, it's only 24 attacks. They don't have Pathfinder, so it's on 4s with Vicious. So on average, they do 12 wounds, right? But I'm at dash 22. That's a 10 to kill me. So yeah, definitely need the other one. Ector might have been a good choice too. And then we have the Thule charging into these, or countercharging into my skeletons, because these guys, my opponent put them ass to front, and that's not what you want to do. It's always ass to ass, guys. So yeah, you want to leave a little bit of room so that you can pivot to get a charge off, because when these guys full correct to over here, it's still not enough space to allow the sharks to get through, and that's not Jossum at all. In the middle, these guys just sit still. My opponent corrects their Kraken placement because I pointed out on the previous turn, it was a bit more like this. And I was like, I totally have a flank on you with my Bone Dragon. It's height 6, so it sees over the Knucker. Also, this is height 6, I think. So I'm like, yeah, I could totally flank charge it, which is 20 attacks, but it's 20 attacks on 5s because I don't have Pathfinder. So I'm like, I won't take it, but you might want to readjust. So yeah, they do. And that's about it. There are no Knuckers over here, so the right flank is a little dead. The Trident King is a little confused about what they're supposed to do. And here we go. We have the combat here. Oh no, the Mythican is what I'm showing off. So the Mythican is hiding as well, casting a spell though, into Ector? Oh no, with Ector into my Bone Dragon. They only manage 3 more wounds together, but they do push it off the hill, so there's that. It's actually over here, I believe, where it's dumb bases. But 6 wounds, then, oh yeah, here's the monster of a combat. My opponent charges with both units of Gigas, does 25 wounds, which is pretty incredible, and double ones it. They're not inspired. That's just 1 double 1. So far this game, we have a high roll on each side of a 4 for our break checks and 1 double 1. So a little bit of a clap there. We're just excellent players. Just as a quick reminder,
if you can't win the game after rolling a double 1, you don't deserve to win the game.
So moving on. Here we go. I'm now devastated. I'm devastated though, because I have 25 wounds on me, which is, who cares? So yeah, the other combat, my opponent does actually a fair bit of damage onto these skeletons, but Thule do have 15 attacks on 3s as a troop, so I'm not too surprised by that. And that is the end of the round. So let's move into turn 2 for the Empire of Dust. So turn 2, Empire of Dust. First off, I move my skeleton cav, the Legion of Chariots, not skeleton cav, over here because I'm gonna go for the old shoot you with my bows and then surge the 1 inch into the flank because I'm hindered either way anyway. I take my devastated skeletons and charge into the side, or into the front, or countercharge into the front of these guys. I take my skeletons here and charge into the front of the Thule because why not continue? I take this bone dragon and go into the front of the depth horrors, and then I finally send my revenant cav into the Thule troop there because they've taken 3 wounds now, and I'm like, well, I could probably one-shot them with the blade of slashing. Smart there. I take my dragon and I just fly around. I do not march. I just fly 10 and I land on this barrier to grant myself cover. I'm not sure it does actually. It's height 2, but still, I plan to fire off a shot into the Kraken there or into the Trident King. Kraken's probably a little far. This dragon, though, does line up a shot on the Kraken, and then I still have 1 war engine to shoot at it as well, and I put a dragon right there on its base, just so both these units, the Trident King and the Kraken, are in its front, and the Kraken can charge this dragon, but it does need to get a 2 for its wild charge. So it's still a little bit random, and I'm not sure it can one-shot it with 12 attacks. And if it does, well, yeah, and if it does charge, it can't dual charge because this dragon's lip is stopping a 75 from orienting this way, right? And then the Trident King would be a corner charge, although the Trident King's probably out of range anyway. Going into the shooting, first off, we've got these chariots. They fire into the Gigas and do 3 wounds into the unengaged ones. Then we have my little bit of a monolith here, casting its surge, hitting 7 out of its 8 as well, so getting that flank charge post haste. And here is the end of turn shot. So starting on the right, let's talk about the shooting, because I forgot to take some pictures of it. I do manage a bit of wound onto this Kraken. I think I did 7 wounds to it, which is woof, that's rough. The Kraken is it's still a 17-19. I shouldn't say only, it's very high nerve, but I do have shattering, so I need a 9 to waver it. I do not hit that 9. I do a couple of damage. I think I did 2 to the Trident King, and we'll see if that sticks, as both these units are regen in the next turn. In the Thule combat here, I do okay. I think I do 3 or 4 wounds. I did forget about the blade of slashing, as I will this entire game, but I do manage a waver, and they are perfectly out of 6, so they will not have fury during the next turn. My dragon here does a couple wounds, so these guys were already at 3, I think, and I do 2 or 3. Now, I made a pretty big mistake right here. Again, with the not backing up an inch, it's just going to take time. But this is probably a mistake, period, which is I went into the front of these guys, and I was like, okay, so I hit on 4s, and I'm like, oh wait, they have ensnare. So they have ensnare. I just took this charge because I had it. Never do that. And on top of it, they now have a flank charge onto this dragon because their actual charge is in my side. Yeah, mistake there. And let's go off to the left. So we have my skeletons here, my skeleton warriors, going back into the Thule. They hit again a hot 1 time, which is pretty bad. They do manage a wound. Oh no, they hit twice then, because they've got them up to 6 wounds, I think. And yeah, they still don't get a kill. I don't even think they waver them because, again, these hot rolls continue. All these nerve checks are a high of a 4. I have not gone above a 4 yet. And then off here on the right, I get a 3 against these guys. They are at 13 wounds, I want to say. I do get a waver, but I needed a 4 to kill them. So, yeah, unfortunately, I get a 3. So they're ready to go. But we did see a very interesting rule, which is now basically so when I countercharged here, I had to orient my edge to the unit that had charged me in the front, right? And the way this works now is that you just nudge the unit slightly off to make sure that people know that it's not engaged in combat. But when you do that, you also, it specifically states you can't do it to gain an advantage, whatever that might be. And on top of this, you also, because I didn't charge these guys, they're not engaged. They don't slide an inch away at the end of my combat. We don't, push my unit away and leave them room. So they're actually locked. These guys cannot decide to take a flank charge, for example, onto these skeletons. They have to charge these ones because there's no way they can orient through me. They cannot pivot through me, right? Because they do not push an inch back. They cannot use the disengage rule. They can't do anything. They're pushed a smidge back, which they are, which is like a millimeter. and that's not enough room to actually orient. So there's a lot of stuff that's stopping those corkscrew charges now, and I'm not sure, this is the rules as written. I'm not sure how intentional it is though. It's an interesting one, that's for sure. And let's move into the next turn. So turn 4. Turn 4 for the Trident Realm goes about how you might think. These guys decide to turn and face. Yeah, because they back up and no, they can't do this. I think this is illegal too, because you can never, and no, this is legal. Okay, yeah, because these were the flank chargers. So they back up an inch from them, pushing this way, and then when they orient again, they're still an inch away. Yes, because this was over here. No, that's impossible. This is not possible. I don't think that was a legal maneuver, just because when you are wavered, you lose your nimble, so you can't get additional movement. And on top of it, you are only allowed to come within 1 inch of an enemy if you are charging. So when they disengage from me, maybe they disengaged one from both of them, and that's how you do it. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the rule again. Anyway. So these guys end up facing directly towards the chariots. These guys go into the flank of the skeleton warriors because it's the only thing they can do. The skeleton warriors are on 25 wounds, so who cares if it's a flank. We have these guys though. I really want them to survive one more turn. That would be great because they're on very minimal wounds. They're on like 3 or 4 right now. And then the Thule plus these depth horrors. Yeah, it's not a pretty fight because those depth horrors are 18 attacks on 3s, and they have Blood of the Old Kings. They'll probably pop it. So 3s and 3s with reroll 1s. That's not great. Great odds for me with a further 15 attacks for some reason. Over here we have the Thule just sitting still. They don't even disengage from my Cav. My Cav get pushed back a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that happened, but they should still be aligned with the Thule. The Depth Horrors can get a flank charge though, and they take it onto my Bone Dragon when they, because they disengage an inch, which gives them enough area to pivot into my corner here, and then they align, and they obviously have more than just the corner there. So they take it. The Kraken just backs up into the woods more, making it so it's going, well, you can charge me with both dragons if you want, but they're both on 6s. And then we have the Trident King coming around the flank of my Revenant Lord, or Revenant King, just a king on king fight there. And let's see how it all goes. So first off with shooting, we have the Trident King. Yeah, they regen 0 wounds because that's how it goes. But then they shoot and do 4 wounds to me because they hit 7 times. So yeah, they end up doing 4 wounds to it. It's up to 7 wounds, and then the Mythicon here with its Lightning Bolt 6 decides to target it as well, or target the Bone Dragon, and gets it up to 4 wounds. It had taken, oh, I'm sorry, actually, no, let's go back. So the Revenant King here, this had not taken any damage before the Bone Dragon had taken 3 damage in turn 2. This guy was completely unmolested and just took 7 wounds from the Breath 15 on the Trident King. Yikes, that is rough. That is a lot. And then this guy fires into my Bone Dragon and pushes it up to 4 wounds. Actually does 2 because it had life leeched 1 back from fighting the Knucker earlier in the game. So good turn for the Trident Realm though. And here we see the aftermath of the turn. Thankfully, neither of these units go away. This was a 14, so there's no roll. But this guy, yikes. And then we have the middle. So obviously this Bone Dragon is wiped out pretty easily. These guys with a flank having 36 attacks on 3s and then 2s to wound because they had the crushing. That's not great for me. I believe Bastion is again on them. And then over here on the left flank, first off, my Skeleton Warriors do hold for 1 more turn. That is beautiful. Good job, Skeleton Warriors. And again, it's because my opponent has rolled a 4 or a 5 or some terrible, I think it's a 5 because they're 1 below whatever their nerve is. And now they have the high roll of the game with a 5. Good job. And then otherwise, everything else stays as it is. So let's move into turn 4 for the Empire of Dust. So turn 4, Empire of Dust. Starting on the left, I decide to take the counter charge with my, or not the counter charge, but the regular charge with my chariots. They are disordered? Oh, that's what happened. Okay, sorry. That whole time I was like, these guys pivoted. They were wavered. What happened? It's that they have the Headstrong Brew. Ah, yes, these ones are Headstrong or Fury or something, and had actually charged into my chariots. They don't do that much damage, but they do disorder them. That's what that orange token is. So sorry about that before. These guys do complete a countercharge into them, into the front. I could have taken them and walked over here and gone for a flank charge, which is why my opponent has oriented the unit like that, because there's no way to actually land in its flank. So there's that. I then go for I actually try to get a combo charge here with my skeleton warriors and the chariot. There's no way I can fit with the percentages. And then on top of it, I try to then move and go for a charge. But this is a very thin line to be pushing, and I just can't work it with a surge because I'll either hit the building or my own unit first. So instead, I just pivot the unit perfectly to hit the corner of this first when I go for my charge. But it's just not doable with surge. I mean, it was, but it would have been like a surge 10 or some ridiculous number. So anyway, we go for the regular charge onto the depth horrors with some chariots. These chariots charging into the very wounded Gigas, and then my monolith deciding to follow up very, very close to my skeleton warriors. We'll see how that turns out. Next up, I have the depth horrors had turned to face my right side and protect their flank because the Thule are directly lined up with it. So there's no way to actually execute a flank charge. So instead, I go for the charge again onto the Thule with my Revenant Cav, and then I move a dragon over here to shoot over them into this unit of depth horrors. Now I am hitting on 5s because I take cover, but we'll see. I move this bone dragon. It's just out of charge range of anything. The Kraken can't charge it, and then the Trident King can't charge it. So that's the plan there. And then I move my very wounded now Revenant King around the side to just shoot into something. It can shoot the Kraken if it wants. It can shoot really, oh no, it can't because it's height 6. So it can shoot the Kraken essentially. So we'll see how that all goes with the shooting base. So first off, we have this dragon firing into this dragon and this dragon both fire into the Kraken. I get it up to 14 wounds, which is pretty good. Again, the regen, I think my opponent rolled average on the regen. I've just rolled high on the wounds here, although it is def 4, so And the dragon over there, it does not have cover against, so. And then I fire also my catapult into it as well, and poof, it's gone. The catapult misses, by the way. So yeah, killed off the Kraken there, and then in the combat phase, I kill the Thule troop. I kill the freaking depth horrors. That's amazing. I'm hitting on 5s, 5s of 20 attacks. I have no buffs whatsoever, and then I wound on 3s. And those guys have only have 3 wounds on them, and just poof, they're gone. They were, by the way, inspired. So this turn I'm rolling. This is when the nerve checks start hitting, because I rolled, I think, a 9 to kill that Kraken. I rolled a 10 to kill these guys twice, or at least ended up with it. High rolls both times. My skeleton warriors here finally kill off the Thule troop, and then the chariots here on their countercharge kill off these wounded Gigas. So everything's gone now, all the dice are going well, and here's how I screwed up the monolith. Which is the monolith, I've decided to follow my skeletons exactly, and I'm like, why? Again, just keep it an inch back, guys. That way you have room to maneuver your stupid horde after you kill the Thule, and you don't get flank charged by Gigas for no reason. So I'm going to get flank charged by Gigas for no reason. Anyway, moving into turn 5, we don't have turn dials anymore. So this is turn 5. First off, we have the Trident King just coming around to kill off this wounded dragon. We have the depth horrors turning around because they couldn't see anything over here as their leader point could not see through the woods. And with that Kraken gone, there's nothing to do over there. So they turn to face the Revenant Cav, and then we have the Gigas, of course, charging into the flank of these skeleton warriors. So let's see how it all goes. First off, we've got the shooting and the Mythicon, and they do 15 wounds to this freaking dragon. I mean, they do 8 wounds, and 7 of that, by the way, is from the Trident King again. Did 7 wounds to me last turn, did 7 wounds this turn. Crazy. But then again, my opponent goes like, ah yes, nerve checks, and rolls a 3, which is 1 below their nerve. So the bad nerve continues for my opponent. I have broken the streak. Let's see if they can get out of it on their last turn. But yeah, over here, these guys end up getting disordered because Ector had charged into them. I forgot about that because he's so tiny. So yeah, Ector charges in, hits 6 times, wounds 6 times. So it puts me to up to 10 wounds, and then can't roll that boxcar to kill me though, thankfully. Very close. This was actually a good nerve check. And then the rest of the turn looks like you can see the Skeleton Warriors are no more because of my excellent monolith placement. So let's see what I can do in my turn 5 with the Empire Dust here. So turn 5 Empire Dust, first off, we side saddle away from Ector because that's not worth fighting. I have a 4-inch side saddle so I can get into the flank of these guys. Gonna go for that easy surge. It's a 3-inch surge though, a little over 2 inches away. And then we have these chariots who just turn on the pivot on the spot and move to an inch away, going for that one as well. This dragon is going to be the surger there. And then I take my bone dragon here and I charge into the depth horrors. The bone dragon's hitting on 6s, but 1 or 2 wounds could be what matters. And I get my knights into the front of the depth horrors. My luckiest dragon ever. Well, lucky and unlucky. The stupid Trident King's shredding it, but then can't roll a nerve to kill it. So it moves just out of the line of sight of the Trident King and is planning to shoot the Mythicin this turn. So let's see how it all turns out. First off, we've got these guys firing their bows, their short bows, and this dragon apparently into the Mythicin. That's not right. Just the dragon fires at the Mythicin and does 3 wounds to it. We'll see how that turns out. And then we have the catapult firing into the Trident King, and it looks like managing 2 wounds there, so that's a shatter. That's a 9 to waver. I'll take. So here is the end of turn 5. We're playing a little fast and loose and the beginning of turn 6. So at the end of turn 5, first off, we've got a kill onto these depth horrors, and it was because the Bone Dragon did 1 wound to them. So that was pretty good. These chariots, both on the combo charge onto those Gigas, kill them off. And by the way, which is funny because the flank guys don't have any Thunderous, so they're wounding on 5s, and then these ones are wounding on 4s, and we just roll lights out. I do not end up getting a waiver onto the Trident King, but I do get a waiver on the Mythicin, which is funny again because it's just out of 6 inches from the Naiad Envoy's ability, their Horm, as I've called it, to give them Fury. So yeah, an interesting turn, and then my opponent takes their turn 6. It's no longer possible to win, but they can get that attrition up. So turn 6 looks a bit like this, same picture of course. We have the Trident King moving around. My dragon is facing like so, but has decided to hide over here menacingly, and it's going to shoot into this dragon. I do have cover due to the forest here. Interesting rule about cover, which is not relevant to this, but you have to actually issue a hold to see through a forest anymore. And what I mean by that is I couldn't take this dragon and then fly over and get into the woods and then shoot at something out of it and turn off that cover. You actually have to issue a hold in your previous movement phase to get that ability, which means that if I have archers or, you know, for example, this artillery, it can issue a hold turn 1 and then it can shoot out forever, right? But if I just move into the woods, I have to wait a bit. Just an interesting thing. So yeah, moving over there, getting ready to fire into the Bone Dragon. So here we go, shark lasers, I guess. And yeah, look at that. It fires into the back dragon though, not into my front dragon, and manages to get me up to 19 wounds, and then my opponent rolls an 11. So they broke the curse. They're there. Yay. Yeah, they shred that thing. That's the second roll, by the way. The first was like a 7 or an 8. And let's go into turn 6 for the Empire Dust. So turn 6 Empire Dust, I basically... Oh, yeah. The other thing is Ector charges into the 10 wound chariots, again does 6 wounds, and just blows them up. So this turn, I did get a bit of bad luck, but it might be too little too late, because I lose the dragon and I lost my chariot horde. But the second chariot horde just trucks on, not giving 2 fucks about Ector, walking over to grab this objective, while again the monolith proves it is better. Well, not proves, but shows off its superiority to a cursed high priest by grabbing an objective. We have these revenant cav just moving over to grab that objective. And then we have my dragon here. It could grab the... So this objective is worth 2. This is worth 2. We haven't flipped them because they're the only ones left. And the rest are only worth 1. So we had 1, 1, 1, and then it turned out with my random ones, these 2 were worth 0, and then my opponent's backfield ones were worth 0, so we just removed them. So those are all gone from the map, and all we have are the ones worth scoring. So yeah, I could grab this 2-pointer, but I don't need to. I'd rather shoot into the Trident King with all I can. I could also, I moved my dragon like so to grab one of the 2-pointers, right? And then I can go for a surge into the Trident King, I guess, but I'll probably just shoot it with breath attacks because I'm not that smart. So let's see what I do. Yeah, first off, we got the dragon. And the rock, that's not great. That means I shot the Trident King. He regen 2 of his wounds in the previous round. I do 1 wound to him, though. Take that. I should have cast Surge onto my Bone Dragon into the flank of this thing, but I did not because I'm not a smart man. And we rolled double 1. Just so you know, we both rolled double 1s in this game, and mine is just as relevant. And here is basically the end of turn shot. Or end of game shot. So we own this objective, we own this objective, and then we own this, or we don't own this. My opponent and I are both contesting it. That's why the Bone Dragon had to be here. And let's see if we get a turn 7. Looks like we do get a turn 7. This is a weird shot of it, though. The Trident King and the Mythican both shoot into my Bone Dragon, killing it off on its turn 7, thus having 2 points, which is, you know, it's a good effort, but let's see if it turns out for the Empire Dust. We have 1 rock throw, 1 king deciding to shoot breath attack again into the Trident King. I do some wounds, but it is still standing at the end of the game. But yeah, so my opponent has 2 points right there, and then I have... I could have moved this back, which is, I just didn't bother moving it because, again, we were just trying to get it through as many games as possible so I can get these battle reports out to you guys. So I am a little bit farther back, so I am grabbing this 2-pointer, but it's not super relevant as I have 1, 2, 3 already, but I could easily have 5 to 2, and it ends up with an Empire of Dust victory. So I'm pretty happy with that. I really like this list. I'll be doing some iterations on it in the future, but 4 dragons is a lot of fun, and I think a undead variant could be even more fun, so I might do that in the future. But anyway, thank you for listening, and until next time, bye.